Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today, we're diving into Bill Gates's How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. You know, climate change is a big deal. But this book really digs into the specifics of what it'll take to get to zero greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, it's not just a feel-good overview. Gates lays out a clear plan, focusing on the innovations we need and the policies that could help us get there. He even dives into the economics with this idea of green premiums.
Green premiums. Okay, so what are green premiums?
It's the extra cost of choosing a clean technology over the one that emits greenhouse gases. For example, if a solar panel system costs more upfront than just burning natural gas, that difference is the green premium.
So are we talking about making everything more expensive then?
Not always. Sometimes the clean option is actually cheaper. But understanding these premiums helps us see where we need to focus our efforts, whether it's developing better technology to bring those premiums down or figuring out smart policies to make cleaner choices more attractive.
Okay, that makes sense. I see. So Gates breaks down emissions into 5 main areas. Right. Making things, plugging in, growing things, getting around, and keeping cool and warm.
You got it. And each of those areas has its own unique challenges when it comes to cutting emissions.
Let's start with electricity. That seems like a good place to begin, since so much of modern life depends on it.
Absolutely. We rely on fossil fuels for cheap and reliable electricity, but that's obviously what we need to move away from. The interesting thing is, in the U.S., we're actually seeing a fairly low green premium for clean electricity. We have a lot of resources for renewables like solar and wind.
That's good news. But I'm guessing that's not the case everywhere.
Unfortunately, no. Many developing countries face much higher premiums. Plus, renewables are intermittent. The sun doesn't always shine, and the wind doesn't always blow. We need better ways to store energy on a massive scale, and that adds to the cost.
So what does Gates suggest we do about that?
He's a big proponent of investing in research and development for some pretty mind-blowing technologies. Next generation, nuclear power, fusion energy, even pulling carbon dioxide directly out of the air.
Wow. Some of that sounds like science fiction. But I guess that's what we need if we want to achieve zero emissions. What about making things? Cement, steel, plastics. Those seem like tough ones to decarbonize.
They are. Those industries are huge emitters, and the green alternatives often come with hefty green premiums. Imagine trying to convince a company to pay way more for low-carbon steel when they could get the cheaper, conventional kind.
Yeah, that's a tough sell. But there must be some potential solutions out there. What does Gates propose?
He talks about using clean electricity for production, switching to electric-powered processes in industries like steelmaking, and developing carbon capture technologies to trap those emissions at the source. It's a multi-pronged approach.
It sounds like we need to get pretty creative to tackle this. What about the plastic problem? It's everywhere.
I know, right? But Gates even explores the idea of making plastic carbon negative, meaning it would actually absorb CO2 from the atmosphere. He proposes using plants as a carbon source for plastic production.
That's incredible. It makes you wonder what other innovations are out there waiting to be discovered. Okay, so we've covered making things and plugging in. What about growing things? How does agriculture fit into this whole emissions puzzle?
Agriculture is actually a major source of emissions. As the population grows, so does the demand for food, which puts more pressure on farming practices that are already contributing to the problem. And here's a surprising fact. Did you know that cow burps are a significant source of methane?
Wait, seriously? Cow burps?
Yep. It sounds funny, but it's true. Cattle digestion produces a lot of methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. So even something as seemingly simple as raising cows for food has a big impact.
I never would have thought of that. What else does Gates point to in terms of agriculture and emissions?
He dives into the overuse and inefficiencies of synthetic fertilizer, which is a big contributor. He also dispels the myth that planting trees is a simple fix. We just don't have enough land to offset all of our emissions that way.
So it's not as easy as planting a bunch of trees and calling it a day. What are some of the more innovative solutions Gates discusses for making agriculture more sustainable?
He talks about things like breeding cattle to produce less methane and developing drought-resistant crops that require less water. He also emphasizes improving fertilizer efficiency so we can reduce waste and the emissions associated with it. It's about finding ways to produce the food we need while minimizing our environmental impact.
It sounds like there's a lot of potential for innovation in agriculture. This is fascinating stuff, but I know we have a lot more to cover.
Welcome back to our deep dive into how to avoid a climate disaster. So far, we've talked about the 5 key areas of emissions, but I think what's really interesting is how Gates ties all of this back to the role of government and policy.
Yeah, you're right. He's very clear that this isn't just about individual actions. We need strong government policies to drive the change we need on a global scale.
Yeah, he's not shy about saying that. And he offers some concrete examples. Like, remember all those amazing technologies we talked about? Next-gen nuclear fusion, carbon capture? Well, Gates argues that those innovations won't happen without increased government funding for research and development.
That makes sense. If we want those breakthroughs, we need to invest in the science and the people working on the solutions. So what other policy ideas does he propose?
He talks a lot about market incentives, like carbon pricing. The idea is to make activities that pollute more expensive, which would make cleaner options more competitive. So it's about leveling the playing field.
Oh, I see. So if we make it more expensive to pollute, then companies will be more likely to choose cleaner alternatives.
Exactly. It's about using economic levers to drive change. And Gates also points out that sometimes outdated regulations can actually hinder the deployment of clean technologies, even if they're cheaper and more efficient in the long run.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's about creating the right environment for those technologies to be successful.
Right. And he stresses that this transition needs to be fair. We can't leave communities behind, especially those who might be dependent on fossil fuel industries. It's about creating a future that benefits everyone.
That's a really important point. But what about us, the everyday people? Does Gates think there's anything we can do? Or are we just supposed to sit back and wait for governments to act?
He definitely doesn't say just leave it to the politicians. In fact, he has a whole chapter dedicated to what individuals can do. He sees individual action as a way to build momentum and put pressure on businesses and governments to do more.
Okay, so what are some of the things he suggests?
Well, he talks a lot about becoming informed and engaged citizens. He encourages people to advocate for climate policies, whether that's writing to elected officials, speaking at town hall meetings, or supporting candidates who prioritize climate action.
So using our voices and our votes to demand change. What else?
He also highlights the power of consumer choices. By choosing green products and services, we can send a signal to companies that there is a market for sustainability.
So things like choosing renewable energy for our homes, buying electric vehicles if possible, supporting companies that are committed to reducing their environmental impact.
Exactly. It's about aligning our spending with our values. He also talks about reducing our overall consumption. Simple things like reducing food waste, choosing energy-efficient appliances, opting for public transportation or biking whenever possible.
It's interesting how he weaves together the individual actions with the larger systemic changes that need to happen. He's saying that both are essential for solving this problem.
He is, and I think that's what makes his book so compelling. He doesn't shy away from the complexity of the challenge.
Right.
He also offers a path forward, a way to address the climate crisis, while still allowing for human progress and prosperity.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. But Gates doesn't just focus on reducing emissions, right? He also talks about adapting to the changes that are already happening. Welcome back to our deep dive into how to avoid a climate disaster. We've covered so much, from the science to the economics to what we can do personally, but he doesn't just talk about reducing emissions, right? He also talks about adapting to the changes that are already here.
Yeah, that's a key point. We can't just focus on prevention. We have to prepare for a world that's already being impacted, even if we reach zero emissions tomorrow.
So what does adaptation look like? What are we talking about here?
It's about preparing for a different world, developing crops that can handle drought, early warning systems for extreme weather, building infrastructure that can handle rising sea levels, things like that.
So we're not giving up, we're just being realistic and figuring out how to live with it.
Exactly. And this is especially important for developing countries. They often face the worst impacts of climate change, even though they contributed the least to the problem.
Right, it's a reminder that this is about people, and it's about fairness. And I think that connects to Gates's overall message of optimism. He sees the challenges, but he believes we can overcome them.
Yeah, his optimism is definitely contagious. He has this incredible faith in human ingenuity. He thinks we can innovate our way out of this crisis.
He's a glass half full kind of guy, especially when it comes to technology. Next-gen nuclear carbon capture, plant-based burgers, all these exciting possibilities.
It does make you feel like a sustainable future is possible, not just some far-off dream.
This deep dive has been amazing. We've learned so much from this book. But I think to really get the full picture, you have to read How to Avoid a Climate Disaster for yourself.
Absolutely. It's a call to action, a roadmap for a better future.
You can find a link to purchase the book in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to Mindful Moments for more deep dives into books that matter.
Thanks for listening.